Okay, I'll start the webinar. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kabir, and I'm with Battle River Research Group. I will be your host for today's session. I got an amazing speaker joining us today, and he will be talking about Kochia Management. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank all the counties that support and fund our work. Because of their support, we are able to offer webinars like these, then those bring valuable information for the producers. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the presentation, please hold them until the very end. We'll have Q&A session. And if something urgent comes up or you need my help during the webinar, feel free to drop it in the message in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on it throughout the session. All right. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker of the day, Dr. Brian Jenks. He's a PhD in weed science, and he has been a weed science since 1997. Dr. Brian, over to you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate this opportunity. It always gives me a big opportunity to learn from you as well, because you have different conditions, different soils, different environment, and then sometimes different products. You've got products that we don't, and we might have a couple that you don't, but we are tackling the same weed, and it's not getting any easier. So just a disclaimer here, being on the border, over the years I have learned some of the trade names and I have attempted to use Canadian trade names. I apologize if I mess some up. I don't know all the label differences between the US and Canada. There are many. There are some products that have the same name, but yet differ in the herbicide concentration. And then even some of the rates that are recommended are not always the same for a given product. Some products that I discuss may not be labeled in Canada, or there may be some that are labeled in Canada but not the US. Some information I will present as research, not as a recommendation. And then when I say something is an option, doesn't mean it provides perfect weed control or is cheap. Okay, so kochia is the topic of the day. We know that it is an annual weed that thrives in dry conditions. In my experience, I've seen the best herbicide for kochia is rain. When we have had plenty of rain or excessive rain, we actually have a hard time even finding kochia. There was a period of 2 or 3 years where we had just oodles of rain, where I had no kochia to do research on our research farm, so I had to go off station. But then it came back. Now we know that it produces tens of thousands of seeds per plant, and the literature will tell you that it has about a 1 to 2 year seed longevity. My experience is different from that. In that time frame where we had 2 to 3 years of rain and not much kochia, as soon as the rain shut off, we had kochia come right back. So I don't know that I buy that 1 to 2 year seed longevity. It may be true, but it doesn't match with my experience. So I'm going to talk mostly about a lot of the herbicides that we use, but we have to also address the cultural practices that can help us, because the herbicides are not going to be the only answer. We have to use some cultural practices to help the herbicides out. And some of those, Ag Canada has done a lot of work with looking at narrow row spacing and increasing seeding rates. Some of the work coming out of Lethbridge and Lacombe, and I'm very sorry to hear about what's going on at Lacombe with shutting down that station. That was highly unfortunate. Anyway, some of the work they did showed that narrow row spacing and increasing seeding rates can definitely help in reducing kochia population. Some of the work I saw was maybe up to 80% could reduce some of the kochia population. So make sure that you are optimizing your row spacing and seeding rates where possible. And then, you know, mowing and roguing isn't something that we really want to do, but given the herbicide options we have, we may have to consider more of that. And then as we talk about herbicides, uh, we really got to focus on kochia size at application, uh, using proper rates, not cutting rates, and then using tank mixes, optimizing with different modes of action where possible. I think some of our herbicide labels do us a disfavor when they tell us that we can spray kochia at 4 to 6 inches. To me, that's absurd. We've got to be targeting kochia that's 1 to 3 inches, not 4 to 6. Because once kochia gets 4 to 6 inches, it becomes a different beast and is very hard to control. One of the things that I think we need to be looking at more is as soon as you spray your burn down, I think I saw most of you are in no-till situations. And so you go out there either pre-plant or just after planting to do a burn down. And is that burn down actually being effective? You probably need to go out there 7, 10 days later, walk that field and make sure that that burn down with whatever you're spraying is being effective. Because in the past, we've been spraying herbicides like sharp, got to get my names right, Roundup, Heat, Aim, um Authority Strike, some of those herbicides for controlling kochia in a burn down. And are we starting to miss some of those? Do you start to have, are you starting to see some group 14 resistance in your area or not? As I look at the map from Charles Geddes and Lethbridge, I don't see that in your area, but has it been tested? Has it been confirmed? It wouldn't, I mean, if everybody else has it, it would surprise me if you don't, but maybe you don't use group 14s as much as some of us in other areas. Um, but that's something you need to be looking at. I believe Charles has a genetic test to test for group 14 resistance, and hopefully you can take advantage of that and not learn through bad experience. If you can take some of just take a few kochia leaves and send them to a lab that's doing the genetic testing, that would be ideal so that you know if your aim and heat are working or not. Then one other point, when you go to Dairy Queen and you order your favorite Blizzard, you can order the same one every time and be just fine. Uh, if you prefer a Chevy truck versus a Ford versus a Toyota, you can buy one of those, the same thing every time. But when it comes to kochia, Mother Nature rules, and we cannot do the same herbicide every single time, or Mother Nature is going to overcome that herbicide. So we're going to have to change things up, even though one herbicide might be the most convenient, the cheapest, you're going to have to change things up in order to keep up with the resistance issues that are going on. Okay, so some of the kochia issues that we're seeing, kochia resistant to some of our herbicides, you've known for decades that group 2 herbicides don't control kochia, like Ally, Express, Refine, Solo. I don't think, 2,4-D hasn't worked on kochia for decades either. And now for going on at least 10 to 15 years, glyphosate has not controlled, or at least here, hasn't controlled our kochia, and I think it's probably similar for you. Now, some of the other resistance that's showing up here is to dicamba, and I think you have some resistance to dicamba as well. We do have some that's resistant to the rates that we are using in soybean, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But a lot of our growers use dicamba in front of wheat, and uh, we're starting to see some failures there. And then, of course, with the Group 14s, Heat, Aim, Authority, Volterra, that this has been a massive hit for us because we have relied a lot on these herbicides over the past 20 years, and we're seeing significant resistance to the Group 14s. So some of the crops that I'm told that you grow, mostly cool season crops: wheat, barley, canola, peas, lentils, lupin, flax, oat. So there's not a lot of uh, chances here. Maybe. Oh, okay. I did see that in wheat you have labeled you can use authority in wheat and durum where we cannot. So some of you may be using it there. Certainly in peas you might be using authority. We have been using a lot of Volterra in the fall to help reduce kochia populations. Volterra has worked very well for us, but now with this Group 14 resistance, we're using it more for not only for kochia, but for mostly winter annuals. Okay, this is the map from Charles Geddes down in Lethbridge. And if my understanding is right, you guys are up here in this area. Um, and the testing that he has done has shown quite a bit of resistance in the southern part of Alberta, and then a lot in Saskatoon, and then some in Manitoba as well. For North Dakota, um, we Joe Eichele, who's our extension weed specialist in the eastern part of the state, collected 100 samples from across the state. The first 60 that he tested, 35 out of 60 were PPO resistant or Group 14 resistant, so over half. Uh, every every sample so far has been glyphosate resistant. 1 out of 5, 12 out of 60 were resistant to dicamba at the soybean XtendiMax rate of 650 mils per acre. That was a surprise to me. I didn't think they'd be that high. And then the next 40 that they ran, again, about half were PPO resistant. So about half of our kochia is PPO resistant, which is very significant because of how reliant we've been on this chemistry. So I'm hoping that you don't have it, but you can tell me later on if you do. You should be checking for it. Um, Hopefully you don't have it. But if it does come, what you're going to see is very poor foliar control from Group 14s like Heat, AIM, Pyroflufen, and Insight. We have seen very poor residual control from Volterra, and then varied residual control from Authority. Now, our soybean herbicides, which is interesting, they're a different subcategory of Group 14s. We have not lost foliar control with those herbicides. Those are the class that we call diphenyl ethers. So in soybeans, we can still use Flexstar and Ultra Blazer and still control kochia, but we've lost control with these other subgroups of Group 14. So this is what we've seen. This is kochia, they're sprayed foliarly with Heat, Insight, Pyroflufen, and AIM. So you can see that it's like spraying water with these herbicides where we used to get very good control. You can see our soybean herbicides still provide control of kochia. And then here's a picture of 6 samples from different locations from mostly the western part of North Dakota, from Mott, Mandan, Berthold, a couple samples from Mohall, and then number 7 here is our susceptible check. So across the top, you can see the numbers. So number 7 here, this is our susceptible check. This group up here was Volterra, sprayed with 90 mils per acre. This is Authority at 118, and then this is down here is our untreated check. So the Volterra did not look good at all in any of the samples compared to our susceptible check here. And then here's Authority with our susceptible check. Everything was controlled. And then again, a varied response. The number 5 and 6 here were from Mohall, different farmers. Number six, the Kochia didn't look good, but the location number five still looked pretty decent. So this is the varied control that we're seeing with authority. Okay, so these are the herbicide groups that we typically use for controlling kochia. Notice I don't even list the group twos because those haven't worked for decades. But with group three, and I think in Canada you probably use Edge more than we do now. We're trying to convince growers to start using Edge and Treflan a little bit more again, just because it's a different mode of action. It's not the greatest control. I typically say we see maybe 60 to 80% control with Edge or Treflan. Edge is a little more expensive than Treflan, but I think it is a little bit more effective as well. With our group fours, now the ones I have circled in red are the herbicides where we are seeing resistance. So we are seeing slight resistance to fluroxypyr. It's not, it's more like 70% control instead of what used to be 95, 99% control with fluroxypyr. And then with dicamba, we are seeing some resistance, as I described earlier, to where we're seeing even resistance to our high rates that we use in dicamba soybeans, or the sometimes even the lower rates that we would typically use in front of wheat. Just a minute, I'm going to grab a water. Now, the atrazine we use in corn, I don't think you have any corn there, but Sencor. Sencor is a herbicide that I'm trying to get growers to use it more, um, because we can use it in lentils, peas, and soybeans, and you obviously are growing peas and lentils, and so I'm assuming that you are using Sencor. Sencor is quite good on from a soil residual standpoint, is provides good control of kochia, but it has to be used in the right soils. And based on what I was told, you might have some lower pHs with higher organic matter. I think you have higher organic matter than we do. We're only in that maybe 2.5 to 4% organic matter range, and I think you're higher than that. And so it wouldn't surprise me if you can safely use Sencor, and I'm trying to get our growers to use it more. But obviously with Sencor, we don't want to use it. When I ask a grower, what's your soil pH, texture, and organic matter, if they don't know, I tell them, well, you shouldn't use this until you know those things. You got to know those characteristics. And so a pH with soil pH of 8. So this is a risky soil. A risky soil would be pH of 8, low organic matter, say close to 2, and a texture of a sandy loam. That's where we probably don't want to be using Sencor, maybe especially in lentil. Um, Now I'll talk about Sencor a little bit more specifically in peas and lentils a little bit later. But Sencor is one that you ought to be using where you can in the right soil. With group 6, Basagran can be used in peas. And some people will kind of laugh at me when I say use Basagran in peas. But most growers are used to spraying um, kochia when it's 3 or 4 inches tall. If you're using Basagran, you can't do that. My experience with Basagran is if you spray 1 inch tall kochia, and I mean 1 inch, not two, not three, 1 inch kochia, with one application, I can get 70% control. Now, I'm telling you this, just my experience. I'm not sure if your label allows this. The on peas, our label says the peas have to have 3 nodes. And so you've got to have a good burn down to get 3 nodes in 1 inch kochia at the same time, which may be a challenge. But where we spray Basagran, 1 inch kochia, and come back with a second application a week later, we get 90% control of kochia. You got to be careful with the adjuvants that you're using. Now, your adjuvants are different than ours. You use, I'm trying to remember the name of the adjuvant that BSF has. I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, got to be careful with the adjuvants. Can't get too hot. Some adjuvants can be too hot on the crop. Need to be careful with spraying in real high temperatures because real high temperatures we can see a little bit more injury, but generally hasn't been a problem. Bromoxynil. We rely on bromoxynil a lot for for kochia control in wheat with products like OnDeck, Talinor, etc. We've got the Group 27 and 6 together. It's mostly bromoxynil that's carrying the load there. So and then if you're using flax, you can spray a bromoxynil. MCP again, it's bromoxynil that's carrying the load. Tough is a newer one. Tough has been brought back to the market. It hasn't had a big fit yet, mostly because of the price. It is extremely expensive. And I will talk about that one a little bit later. But Tough is an option, but it's not cheap. Roundup, we know about that. Liberty, I'm going to talk a lot about Liberty. Group 27, Callisto, you may not have used. Callisto is actually a corn herbicide, but can be used. We can use it in oat and flax. I I I don't think I went back and confirmed if you can use it in oat and flax, but we can. So that's maybe one you ought to look up. Um, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And of course, in wheat, Infinity FX, this product has been probably the standard for us, where has looked the best in wheat, provides the best kochia control. Talinor has been decent, maybe not quite as good. On Deck, I'll be talking about that a little bit later. That one has looked comparable, but definitely has some good features to it that will help us. Group 15s do not provide foliar control, but we've seen in some research that Focus and Zidua can provide some residual control of kochia. Residual suppression, not control. And I'll talk about that more later. Group 14s. We've been using them for years. You know about them. But unfortunately, at least here, we're seeing significant enough resistance that we're needing to look at other areas or other products to control kochia with and with other, maybe tank mixes now with Group 14 and something else. Okay, if the information I have is right, I think you're growing mostly spring wheat. I hope I'm right there. So spring wheat in a burn down, these are our options. Glyphosate, I think these are your options. You can correct me if there's something else that you have that I don't have here. Authority strike, heat, aim. So group 9, group 14. So we've got, we know we have resistance to glyphosate. Hopefully you don't have resistance to group 14s. Dicamba, a lot of our growers use dicamba in front of spring wheat. And then you've got a product that we don't, called Husky Pre. So it's like Husky, but it's a little bit different ratio. I think it has a little bit more bromoxynil in it. And this is only going to be used in front of spring wheat, not in front of other crops. But this gives us a different mode of action to control kochia. And then BSF has another product that's used in front of canola, Certitude. So that's also group 6 and 27. So you got some different options there. But if you get to the point where you have resistance to group 9s and 14s, if we take away the group 9s and 14s, you're basically left with dicamba and husky pre. So uh, that's something to keep in mind and to be watching for. When you go out and do your burn down, we come back here, you doing a burn down, say with glyphosate and heat, and you go back out there 7 days later, and you've got kochia that look like the tips were burned, but it's regrowing, then you can probably strongly suspect you've got group 14 resistance. Okay, I mentioned the certitude that BSF has in Canada. We don't have this. Bromoxyl and tropramazone. In the work I've done, it has looked very good on kochia in a burn down. And then tough. You've got this labeled. We don't yet. This is labeled in a burn down situation in front of canola, chickpeas, corn, and peas. At the label says this rate, 400 to 600 mils per acre. This is okay. Now for me, I have to put that into fluid ounces, and so just to uh, I relate everything back to the chickpea rate. The chickpea rate is 700 mils per acre foliarly. This is foliar control. So we're using a reduced rate here compared to the chickpea rate that's been around for decades. Um, and so at this 700 mils, it actually does pretty good on kochia, especially if you get sunny, warm, humid conditions. Tough is very good on kochia. Now, is it going to be as good on kochia in early May? I don't know. I think it can be okay, um, but we've tested some lower rates, and on that 1 inch kochia, it's pretty good. But once you get up to 3 inch kochia in early May, it might be a different story. Uh, those low rates, but I think 14 to 400 to 600 mils might get that 1 inch kochia. But one of the things you want to keep in mind with tough is if you got the same price that we do, it's very expensive and um, way too expensive. You may not even consider it. But talk to your retailer because the company Belsham has told me that they have a rebate program and they can get the price down. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so looking at other crops, kochia burned down in some of our minor crops. So I'm assuming you're no-till and you need to control that kochia that's emerged just prior to planting or just after planting. So in canola, you've got glyphosate, AIM, Certitude, Tough, Liberty. These are products that I think you have labeled. Now I have a couple of asterisks here by Liberty because I ask our growers, what are you going to spray in canola when kochia develops resistance to Liberty? And that may be less than 5 years away. We don't know. Hopefully not. And I will talk about that more later. But I would rather not see us spray Liberty in a burn down if we can help it, even though it's on our label. I'm not sure 100% sure it's on your label. It is on our label as a burn down. But you know, looking at the temperatures in early May, I'm not sure it's the best time to be spraying Liberty. If we can possibly use some, if we can make some of these others work, and the Certitude I've tested has looked really good. So, and I'm assuming that a lot of you are using it. In dry peas, similar, uh, glyphosate, heat, authority strike, tough. Those are options. But again, these are uh, you got it. For us, the glyphosate, heat, and authority strike aren't working anymore. I hope they are for you. Same thing with lentils. Don't have a lot of options. For whatever reason, Belgium put tough on peas and chickpeas, but not on lentil. Don't know why. At least that's what I see on your label. Okay, with flax, um, glyphosate authority strike. I'm going to talk about another product though that I didn't include on here. Callisto. I probably should have included Callisto on here. Or at least it's on our label as a pre. I don't know how much burn down activity it has by itself, but that's on our label. I think it's on yours too. Oh wait, no. I forgot. Callisto is an Eastern can. The way I see your label, it looks like it's an Eastern Canada product, but maybe it's something that your minor use people can work on and get in Western Canada. I don't know. And then similar with chickpeas. Okay, so if we take away the group 9s and 14s, this is what you're left with. You still have some options here in canola, but you don't have a lot of other options. And maybe when I'm done talking, you can share with me, what else you're using that's labeled to control kochia and burn down. Okay, let's move to spring wheat. So if you look at these bars, and I purposely left out the herbicides because I want you to focus on these 4 bars right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, we're only getting about 70% control with these 4 herbicides, whereas the others we're getting much better control. And the difference is that these 4 are herbicides that have fluroxapyr as the main kochia product, meaning the only product in the tank that has kochia activity is fluroxapyr. And so this is where we're seeing a slight reduction in control with fluroxapyr. Hopefully you're getting better control of fluroxapyr up there. Or up there. I don't know. I think you're a little further north than we are, but okay. Some parts of Canada are south of me because I'm only an hour from the border. Anyway, so these others up here typically contain another product like bromoxynil. So I tell our growers, don't rely on fluroxapyr alone to control kochia. Hopefully you can find there are plenty of products in spring wheat where we can include a bromoxynil containing product to have the two together to help us reduce kochia. Okay, for example, this is some work from over a couple of years, couple of locations. This is Infinity FX at 2 rates, a lower rate and a higher rate. We're getting 90+% control in 2024 and 2025. Prominex MCP. Now this is where we've got the situation where we've got it's mostly just fluroxapyr in this tank mix. So we're getting less control. We're not getting complete control with that fluroxapyr. Talinor, bromoxynil MCP, on deck has looked very good. And then Enforcer D, which is a bromoxynil fluroxapyr 2,4-D combination, has looked very good on kochia as well. And again, we're targeting small kochia, less than 3 inches at application. Okay, I want to talk about on deck for a minute here, because on deck is it's got a group 27 and group 6. Now we've had group 27s in the past with like Infinity FX and Talinor, but the topirolate portion of this gives us some grass activity. If you've got foxtails, barnyard grass, it will not control wild oat, but it has looked decent on kochia as long as the kochia is small. Now notice here where we've sprayed 6-inch kochia, we only get 77 to 82% control. But 1 to 4-inch kochia or 1 to 2-inch kochia, we get greater than 90% control. So again, if we can get that kochia when it's small, we can adequately control kochia. Then the same thing with green foxtail. This is the great thing about On Deck is that it will control our group 1 and group 2 resistant green foxtail. If we're spraying small foxtail, we get over 90% control. If we're spraying larger foxtail, only about 80. The other benefit of On Deck is the crop rotation interval. So with Talonor and Infinity, um, we've got longer crop rotation restrictions. You can't plant lentils after that, after those. And I'm not sure about peas in your area. But with On Deck, it's only a 10-month crop rotation restriction to crops like canola, chickpea, flax, lentils, um, mustards, peas. So that is really favorable. You can get foxtail control as well as still be able to rotate to these other minor crops. Okay, I want to shift to some of the fall applied research that we've been doing with Focus and Zidua. Now, Focus is pyroxasulfone and AIM, and for fall applications, pretty much ignore the AIM. It's not going to help us much. So it's basically pyroxasulfone that's carrying the load here, either as Focus or Zidua. And why are we doing fall applications of it? Is because we worked for years with these products in the spring, and kochia, as you know, is one of the first weeds to emerge, and we just can't get Focus. We can't get the Focus or Zidua activated in the soil in the spring early enough to provide much kochia control. We've had better luck applying it in the fall, and I think maybe you've been doing this too. I think uh, maybe you were doing it before we were. But this is the rate of Zidua that 118 mils per acre of Zidua, or Focus 133 mils per acre. That's the rate where we've been getting decent suppression of kochia. These other rates have been okay, but not. We've had to get up to this rate here in order to get close to 75 to 85% kochia control. Now, this rate has also been helping us with wild oat, because we've got some massive wild oat group 1 and group 2 resistance issues with wild oat, and this has been helping us with kochia and wild oat. Just a reminder, I don't know if you grow durum up there, but can't use this in durum. Okay, just to summarize a lot of data, suppression to good control of kochia, wild oat, and brome species, Japanese brome, downy brome. With these fall applications of Focus Residua, basically 60 to 90% suppression of these weeds with the fall applications. Other weeds like green foxtail, wild buckwheat, prickly lettuce, lamb's quarters, not as good a control. But notice these are weeds that emerge later. These weeds that emerge earlier, that's where we're seeing the better control. So I'm not saying this is 60 to 90, 90 is good, but we get 60 to 70, not so good. But if we're running out of options, this will at least help. Now, the other issue with this is price. Focus and Zidua haven't been cheap. But now with things coming off patent, I expect some new generics to come out, and I expect the price to come down. We're already starting to see that. Okay, here's an example where 2 years, 24 and 25. This is kochia control with fall applied Focus. At this 118 mils, we're in that 70 to 75% control range. So, like I say, it's suppression. It's not necessarily great control. Yes, we can get better control with higher rates, but you got to stay within whatever the label recommends. Here's another location. This was Caleb Dally down in Hettinger, which is in the southwest part of the state, about 4 hours southwest of me. Again, with that 118 mils, um, pretty similar, 75% control of kochia. Okay, now I think you do have some wild oat issues up there, so I included this fall applied Zidua with the wild oat. Now this work was done near Fargo. This was conventional till, but I'm going to move further west in a couple of later slides to show uh, wild oat control in drier situations, drier conditions, different soils. But I'm going to show you that the data is kind of the same across locations. So Kirk Howitt did this work from 22 to 23, 24, 25. Some of this was incorporated and some of it was just surface applied. But the data is consistent. At this 96 mils, seeing about 65, average of 65% wild oat control. At the 118 mils, about 85% wild oat control. So this was conventional till near Fargo. Now, if we move to a minimum till situation, similar data. This 96 mils, again, about 70% control average. And then 118 mils, we're in that, again, 85% wild oat control with that um, over those 4 years. Okay, what about a no-till situation in a drier condition? So this would be Hettinger, which is much drier, down in the southwest part of the state. Here, Caleb applied the Zidua. He looked at a September application versus an October application and actually didn't see that much difference between the two. With that 118 mils, again, right around that 80% wild oat control range. So that shows pretty consistent data across 3 different locations that we're getting decent wild oat control with this herbicide applied in the fall. Okay, let's move to some specific crops to look at fall application, burn down application, post application. So, a fall application, I'm trying to get our growers, canola growers, to consider going back to and including an edge or a trefolan as a fall application to help take some of the selection pressure off of Liberty. Now, I'm not sure where you are with your breakdown between Liberty and Roundup, but probably greater than 80% of our canola now is Liberty. And so we're putting a lot of selection pressure on Liberty. So we've got, I covered these burn down options, and then Liberty is most likely for us our main burn down option. And then again, I have this asterisk here by Liberty. Should we be using it in a burn down? Probably not. In that first week of May, you're in that 15, 16 C range. Second week of May, 17, 18. We know that Liberty likes heat, humidity, and sun to make it effective. Um, some years you may have that, but I just worry about using Liberty too much and losing that to resistance. And so I'm preaching to our farmers, do everything you can to preserve Liberty. Couple of interesting things I came across. Cold water temperature, the temperature of the water when you're spraying. This Purdue University study showed a reduced Liberty performance when it was, oh, sorry, I forgot to switch these to Celsius. 41, sorry, I got to do the math here. 5 degrees, I should know that off the top of my head. 5C, okay, compared to a higher temperature. Um, then Liberty efficacy is related more to humidity than air temperature. So we've known for years humidity is extremely important with Liberty. Liberty doesn't like 17% humidity. I'm going to show you some data. It likes more like 30 to 40% humidity. So how can we properly steward Liberty and canola? We want to, if possible, you don't control the weather, but you can sometimes wait a day or two when the conditions are better. Avoid temperature extremes like 10°C or 32°C. You know, cold temperatures, hot temperatures. We want to avoid those extremes. Again, Liberty likes warm, humid, sunny conditions. It likes medium droplets. It doesn't like the large droplets. One of the challenges we have is in soybeans, we've got a dicamba nozzle that sprays big droplets. That doesn't work well with Liberty. It likes the medium, maybe medium to coarse droplets at the most. Higher water volume. If my math's right, 140 to 190 liters per hectare or 50 to 20 gallons per acre. Got to use the proper AMS. Um, I don't recommend the AMS replacements. Small weeds, 1 to 3 inches. Not you get to 4 inches, it's a different beast. Again, I would rather see us avoid using it pre. I would say beware of some of the generic liberties because they're not necessarily equivalent. And we haven't tested all of them, but some of them are certainly providing inferior weed control. Consider Treflan or Edge, and then make sure you have a strong weed control program prior to going to canola. Okay, some work that we did. I asked this question: should we tank mix Roundup and Liberty? This is more for in canola. There's some canola traits that where you can spray both Roundup and Liberty, or in soybeans as well. And so we did this study where we sprayed May 12, and this doesn't happen every year, but we were at 34°C and 17% humidity. How do you think Liberty does in 34°C and 17% humidity? And the plants were extremely drought stressed. So here we've got Roundup. Um, so ignore the rates because I didn't switch them over, but this is Roundup, just a normal rate of Roundup. Liberty Ultra or Liberty at a normal rate, and then Roundup and Liberty together with a standard rate of Liberty, and then a higher rate of standard rate of Roundup, a little bit higher rate of Roundup, just to see if Liberty is antagonizing a little bit. So we know Liberty isn't, this is dandelion. We know Liberty isn't great on dandelion. Poor control. But Roundup, even in this drought condition, still looked good. But Liberty did not. But lamb's quarters. We know Liberty is not the greatest on lamb's quarters, but in drought conditions at these high temperatures, only 20% control with Liberty. Whereas where we had Roundup in the tank, we still got decent control. So I'm showing you here that a drought stressed plant with low humidity is not the best time to be spraying Liberty. If we can wait a day or two until we have higher humidity, plants maybe aren't as drought stressed, we'll get better control with Liberty. This is green flower pepperweed. It's just another winter annual mustard. Again, only 60% control with Liberty in that drought stress condition. And then here's Kochia. Of course, we've got Roundup resistant Kochia here, but Liberty by itself only 40%, and then with Roundup and Liberty together, not good in this drought stressed condition. Now, we repeated these treatments a few days later when we had lower temperatures, about 21°C and 30% humidity, and we had significantly better control. So, moral of the story here is, I know you when you want to spray, you want to spray, but sometimes if you can wait until you have better conditions, keep that in mind when spraying Liberty. Okay, another thing to consider when spring went for Liberty is your crop rotation and how you're using it. If you're going canola wheat, for our growers it might be soybean wheat, and we're using a low fluroxypyr rate. We're using Liberty twice, and that's our herbicide program. This is prime development for resistance. So I say use a crop sequence where you can use Liberty once every 3 to 4 years, if possible, to try and extend the life of Liberty. And then don't use these cut rates. This is where we first found our first uh, using this type of program is where we found our first Roundup resistance and starting to see the fluroxypyr resistance where we're using cut rates of fluroxypyr. Okay, flax. I see you grow a little bit of flax. We've got some options like Edge, Volterra in the fall, maybe a Zidua or a Focus. Our spring burn downs again. Now notice I include Callisto here, but if I read your label right, I think it's Eastern Canada only. But I present this to you just because maybe if your minor use people can do a little bit of work, maybe you can get this labeled in the West. Uh, Post emergence, bromoxynil MCPA, that's pretty standard. The reason I bring up Callisto here is Callisto for us is labeled, we can use it in oat and flax. In this study last year, I applied Callisto at 3, 4.5, and 6 fluid ounces. Now, just as a comparison, in the Eastern Canada rate, if my math is right, 4 fluid ounces here, 4 is equivalent to about 120 mils per acre. And so with that rate of Callisto applied pre, now this is not foliar control, this is residual. We're getting about 80%, 75, 80% control with that 4.5 ounces or 120 mils. So that is in oat. It's all for us, it's also labeled in flax. Um, I think it I think it is labeled on your label. My memory's not helping me here, but I'm just presenting this to you as an option uh, to look at in the future if you're growing oat or flax. Okay, dry peas. Same scenarios. Edge, Volterra, Zidua. Volterra worked for us for years as a fall application until we started getting this group 14 resistance. And now we're having to look at other herbicides like Edge or Zidua and Focus in order to reduce some of that population uh, that's emerging in the spring. You've got tough labeled in a burn down at that 400 to 600 mils range. Uh, See what the price is. Hopefully, it's cheaper than what it is for us. Sencor, uh, Sencor. I try and get our growers to use Sencor in peas if the soil characteristics are right. And then I talked to you about Basagran spraying small kochia. Zidua and Focus in the spring. I have not been able to get it to work it because again, we just don't get the herbicide activated early enough to get that early emerging kochia. So my preference would be a fall application. Chickpeas, everything very similar. Now, post-emergence in chickpeas, we've got Tough. And Tough, again, is very good at that chickpea rate. Post-emergence is very good on kochia, but it is pricey. Lentils, we don't have as many options, obviously, in lentil. Still want to consider Edge, Volterra, and Zidua or Focus in the fall, not necessarily in the spring. Now, you use Sencor more than we do in lentil. And if I understand right, your label has it post only. Whereas we have a pre option, but it is very Injury can occur when we apply it pre and you get a rain right after application. We have to be careful with that when we apply it pre. I think you primarily use it post. I if I look at your tough label correctly, I don't see that you can use tough post. We can use it post, but if you happen to look at our label, it says you can apply tough and Sencor together. My recommendation is don't do it. I'm telling our growers don't tank mix tough and Sencor together. We're seeing way too much injury. Okay, just a couple more slides here. Now, this I'm sharing a concept with you rather than a specific looking really at specific herbicides. Now, this was work on water hemp, which is a nasty pigweed, where Joe Ikley sprayed. He took all of his data from the last 5 years, and he looked at the level of glufosinate Liberty compared to 2,4-D, compared to Liberty plus 2,4-D, compared to dicamba. So, and then he put together these box and whisker plots. So you've got the range here of control. You've got the mean of 80, 74, 94, and 61. So to control water hemp, this is post only. Post only, no pre's. You can see the wide range of dicamba uh, control of water hemp here. It's not great with dicamba. Where he had the tank mix of glufosinate or Liberty 2,4-D, it was much better. 2,4-D by itself, decent but not great. Liberty by itself, decent but not great. You put the two together, looks much better. Now, what if we do a pre before a post? So we're trying to get our growers not to apply post only herbicides. If we put a pre, any pre, followed by a post, can we tighten up these numbers? And the answer is yes. Where we have the same herbicides that follow a pre, have a post following a pre, look at the difference. So this my message here is don't rely on post only. Use pre's where you can to get much better control having the pre first followed by the post. Now, last slide. Going back to what I said, talking about the cultural practices in the beginning, combining some of the cultural practices such as varying planting dates, row spacing, higher seeding rates, some of those cultural practices with our herbicides. Um, I see most of your crops are cool season, and that's a part of where you live. We have the same. I'm in North Dakota. We can't grow every crop here either. But where we can fit in cool versus warm season to change things up, short season versus long season, fall versus spring plant crops, annual versus perennial crops, where we can get some diversity in the system, uh, we can do a better job of managing the kochia and other weeds. Then when it comes to herbicide selection, using residuals, a pre followed by a post, not relying solely on post only. Using different modes of action where we can. Even though we might, Liberty may be our go-to all the time. Can we add something else to the tank? Can we add a saw, an edge, in the as a pre? Is there a tank mix that we can do so that we have two modes of action working together? Instead of relying on a fluroxypyr by itself, can we get a bromoxynil in the tank to have the two modes of action together? Using labeled rates. No more cutting rates of fluroxypyr or any other herbicide. We know that cut rates leads to weed survival and then ultimately weed resistance. Spraying small weeds, 1 to 3 inch kochia. We label says 4 to 6, ignore it. Okay, then these other, I list other practices here: fertilizer placement, layered herbicides, cover crops where possible, cultivation if you're into conventional till, hand weeding where possible. I know the Lacombe station has done a lot of work with the seed destructor, and then in some situations, zero tolerance is best. So that's where I'm going to stop and entertain any questions.
Perfect. We will open the floor for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, you can type it in the Q&A section. Or if somebody who doesn't like typing, they can always raise their hand and they can always write their question in the chat too. Is there anything else you want to add on until as people are typing their questions?
No,
No? Like anything else you want to conclude with?
I'll just conclude with diversity is the best option, and then as I said, trying to mix different cultural practices with the different variety of or uh, different crops, different herbicide modes of action, combined with the cultural practices, we can maybe stay ahead of the kochia. And then again, I stress that I getting your after you're doing your burn down, go back to your field 7-10 days later, see if you've got kochia that's been injured but not completely controlled. It's not dead. That's where you should be able to pick those leaves and send them off to have it genetically tested for group 14 resistance, because once you get that group 14 resistance, it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah. What about control using tillage? There's a question.
Yeah, tillage is always an option. Um, for us, we don't like it because our we have a lot of wind here and soils blow. But if you're desperate, you got a weedy mess to deal with. Tillage may be, hopefully can be considered a rare option. But if your wind doesn't blow there, maybe it's not as big of a deal. But for us, it's a huge deal.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Someone,
Appreciate your
no,
time.
there's more question. There's more
Oh, okay.
question. Yeah. So one person says, "Thank you for the information. I learned a lot." And there is an actual question: is it possible to have success limiting the kochia seed bank establishment by using residual herbicides for 2 years in a row? Do you have any experience with this, and what's the expected result should be?
Okay. I understood the question as if you use residual herbicides to control kochia for 2 years in a row,
Yeah.
will you eliminate it?
Uh,
Um, or
he's saying, do you have any experience with this, and what should be the expected result?
okay, so back when for us when authority in the beginning when authority was being used, you could go back, side by side plots where we had authority and where we didn't. Yeah, you could definitely see a difference between the two. Where we had the residual control, there was far fewer kochia plants. You do that 2 years in a row with whichever herbicide you're using, absolutely. If you can keep that from going 2 years, or if you keep any kochia from going to seed for 2 years, you're well on your way. But as I mentioned before, that's what the literature says, but that's not my experience. I do, and then the other thing is you can be the best farmer and get that residual control from 2 years, but you know how kochia travels, and if your neighbor isn't doing the same thing, you're going to get his kochia blowing onto your field. But yes, I hope you can use residual herbicides, whether it's an edge, an authority, a Sencor, use those where possible, and to help give that residual control and not rely solely on the post treatments.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question. I guess I don't see any more questions. Guess you did an amazing job with your presentation. Okay, then I guess we can conclude the webinar. Thank you, Dr. Brian, once
Okay,
again for giving your time today and sharing such a valuable information. We truly appreciate your contribution. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. We hope you really liked this webinar and you found it informative. And if you have any feedback or suggestions about our future webinars or any future topics, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always looking for new ideas. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing at our new at tomorrow's webinar. Thank you.
thank you. Have a good
Yeah,
day,
you
and
too. Have a good
best
day.
wishes for 2026.